We have a brief program for you tonight. And I also at the beginning want to remind the spokespeople from each of the review groups that they will need their recommendation information at the end of the evening. So grab it now, make sure you have it handy so that when we call upon you, you're ready. My name is Maggie Morrison. I'm the Executive Director of the Chicago Foundation for Education. We have lots more introductions and thank yous this evening, but I'll begin with just a few. First, I'd like to thank Brian Dewey, our board chairman, and the managing partner here at Skadden for their generous offer to host this event again this year. I also want to acknowledge the 30 Fund for Teachers fellows who are in the room, some of whom helped to read grants tonight. In addition, we've been joined by a number of members of the CFE Board of Directors, the Associate Committee, grant readers and volunteers, our partners from Fund for Teachers National Office in Houston, and the CFE staff, Christina Guerrero, Caroline Bealby, and Colton Mullenix. So thank you to all of those people and many others, all of the friends of CFE who helped make tonight possible. Again, I'm just here to kick off the short program. There are lots more interesting things to do tonight than listen to me talk. But I want to start with an observation, which is that we all know, whether we're a teacher or have been taught by other people, that teaching is a challenging and really important job. Maybe more now than in any time in recent memory, at least mine. That makes it all the more reason that I'm happy that we're here tonight to have this opportunity to celebrate teachers and the valuable work that you do in our community, truly changing lives for the students in your classroom every day. CFE has been encouraging, empowering, and inspiring teachers to do their best work with students for more than 30 years. Tonight, we will award $90,000 in grants for self-designed summer professional development and growth based on what teachers know about their teaching practice and about their students. Before we announce the grants that are being recommended for funding tonight by the volunteer groups that joined us earlier, I'd like for you to hear from some of the teachers who can tell you firsthand what the Fund for Teachers experience means. First up, I'm happy to introduce Sandra Shimon, who's a teacher at Prosser Career Academy High School.
Thank you. Right or wrong, the idea that the Vietnam War was fundamentally immoral was instilled in me at a very early age. And my political ideals have informed my life choices and my commitment to education as an act of social justice. In my teaching life, I have the great good fortune of looping with my students twice. I have them as sophomores in literature class and then as juniors and seniors in a 2-year international baccalaureate course called Theory of Knowledge, where students are challenged to question what they know and how they know it and look at things from diverse perspectives. I teach my sophomores Tim O'Brien's novel, The Things They Carried, a work of metafiction about the experiences of American soldiers during and after their tours in Vietnam. While students cannot know the author's intention, there are inevitable discussions about O'Brien's opinion on the war. When I have these same students as juniors, we read the chapter in Lies My Teacher Told Me about how the Vietnam War is only marginally covered in American history textbooks. And that leads to rich discussions about why that might be. The lessons are interesting, but they have never felt complete. It is my duty to compel students to look at things from multiple perspectives. I struggled to do this well when I felt I had only a tenuous grasp on the complexity of the Vietnam War. I had to admit that while my students came away from class with a much better understanding of the Vietnam War from an American perspective, they really had no better understanding of it from a Vietnamese perspective because I had so little information to offer them. My limitations were never more clear to me than when I traveled to Vietnam for my fellowship. More than anything else, recognizing my own bias and having my assumptions challenged led to growth in my teaching. I consider myself to be open-minded, liberal, and curious. And it was good for me to be reminded that no matter how open-minded I believe myself to be, I am still stubbornly informed by preconceived notions and what were revealed to be dogmatic beliefs. It is said that history is written by the victors, and it is true that the official communist doctrine names this historic event the Resistance War against America. However, it is also true that the only time I encountered that phrase while traveling in Vietnam was at the War Remnants Museum, a place that my guide referred to as a temple of communist propaganda. I was more often reminded by the Vietnamese people I encountered and spoke with that the dispute was a civil war before the United States was involved. I'm embarrassed now to admit that because the Vietnam War was so unpopular here, I had forgotten to consider that the Vietnamese people in the South desperately wanted our assistance, formed important attachments to the American soldiers who were stationed there, and were devastated when the United States withdrew troops in 1973. My assumption was that the Vietnamese would have been angry about our presence. In fact, many of them despaired our absence. As an American, I was greeted warmly in both the North and the South. In fact, everywhere I went, Vietnamese people approached me to take pictures with me and of me and touch my stomach. And at one point, I was pulled off the street and into a wedding party because of the pervasive belief that a marriage will be blessed with constant good luck if an American is present at the wedding. Multiple people in Vietnam told me that as a people, they do not look back. They look forward and are hopeful for the future. This is clear when a traveler looks for signs of the war, and there are none. The jungle has reclaimed the military bases, and it is only possible to identify airstrips as the best roads in the very few villages that are laid out on a grid system. My unit of study for my students has changed. I have supplemented my teaching with video clips and photos and blog entries and propaganda posters from my trip. And my students now read The Sorrow of War by Bao Ninh, in addition to the things they carried, to analyze the depictions of survivor guilt from a Viet Cong perspective compared to an American one. My student Daisy is writing a paper right now comparing these texts, and she is animated when she talks about the interchangeability of the experiences Ninh and O'Brien describe. In my grant proposal, I intended these changes and others to my unit exploring the Vietnam War, and I will meet those goals. But it's important to note that my fellowship has informed so many other lessons. I'm working to compel my students to face their own assumptions more and more and to consider diverse perspectives. The vast majority of my students are Latino, most of them from Mexico, and this year they are conducting an analysis of the American bias with which travel books on Mexico are written. I've always had my students investigate current events, but now I'm challenging them to find articles on those same events that have been published by the foreign press to look for differences in how they are reported. Further, for summer reading this year, my students will read two books, a piece of American literature and a text in translation that has similar themes, so they can consider the implications of ideas from different global perspectives. The truth is that my teaching has changed because I have changed. Travel is an excellent teacher, and this experience compelled me to question what I know to be true and to reevaluate my socio-political beliefs in a way that I haven't been forced to in a long time. And that, as much as any content knowledge could, has made me a better teacher and my classroom a more fertile place for student growth and learning. For that, I owe a debt of gratitude to Fund for Teachers and the Chicago Foundation for Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. And now I'd like to invite Kiri Sierra, an elementary school teacher in a Chicago public school, to talk about her fellowship experience.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. So my name is Kiri Sierra, and I work in a fourth grade dual language classroom. So what does that mean? It means that I teach half the day in Spanish, half the day in English. Now, Spanish is not my first language, and so it's something that I have to continually work on, because for a lot of my students, I am their best example of Spanish because they may come from a household where their parents only had up to a second grade or maybe even a sixth grade education, or for some of my students who come from a home where there is no Spanish spoken in the home, and they're just as much as a gringo as I am, but they're in the program as an enrichment program I am their best model for Spanish, as well as their peers around them. So from this environment of dual language where students are learning both Spanish and English, I got the inspiration for my project. My project had 3 goals. One was linguistic, another was pedagogical, and the third was a curricular goal. So I started out with wanting to be a better Spanish speaker, and more specifically, a better Spanish writer. When I'm doing a shared writing with the class, in English, don't pause with my writing. Everything flows really easily. But since Spanish is my second language, sometimes I'm a little bit choppier. And sometimes it's harder for me to get the ideas out, which is not an ideal model for my students. So I really wanted to go someplace where I could sit down one-on-one with a tutor who could really dig down deep into my writing to show me the errors that I was making that I didn't even recognize, the mistakes that I was making that I didn't even know I was making. So that was really my main goal, the thing that I really wanted to dig deep into. So then from there, I chose where I wanted to go and actually work with a tutor. It just so happens that last year, my principal had an exchange with a principal from a school in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So this principal came and was shadowing my principal. I developed a relationship with her, and I thought, how exciting would it be for me to actually sit in on literacy writing lessons in a classroom in Buenos Aires, where they are teaching as native Spanish speakers writing skills. What could I bring back to my colleagues and to my own classroom about really, really good, solid native language instruction for writing? So I developed a partnership with that principal, and I was able to get a pen pal relationship started. So currently, my students and students grades 1st through 5th have had 2 exchanges. So they've received 2 letters from Buenos Aires, and they have sent 2 letters to Buenos Aires. And for my students to get a little coin from Buenos Aires and then tape a little quarter onto their letter and send it back down to South America, it's just really exciting. And it gives them a purpose for their writing in Spanish. They are really motivated and driven to write a really, really good letter to their amigo down in Buenos Aires. So that's how I chose Buenos Aires, Argentina. But then I wanted to develop another part of this proposal, which ended up being my curricular goal. I wanted to take my social studies unit on immigration, which was a little bit dry and didn't really incorporate much of my students' cultural background, much of their identity as immigrants themselves. I wanted to take something and I wanted to enrich in it. I wanted to make it better. So I started to think about the immigrant neighborhoods and the immigrant populations in Buenos Aires. I'm sure many of you know that Buenos Aires had many, many immigrants from all over Europe that ended up in these neighborhoods where tango bubbled out of these immigrant populations. And tango is arguably Argentina's cultural jewel. It has been exported to Paris and London and New York. Right here in Chicago, there are several tango groups that get together and you can learn tango and take tango lessons. So I wanted to use that as a case study for my students so that they could see how immigrant populations can drastically influence their host culture and then be able to turn it around to them to say, what about your families? How is your culture incorporated into American society and American culture? Isn't that rich? Isn't that awesome? So my immigration unit has been really exciting this year. Seeing my 9-year-olds try to dance the tango has been really fun. And it's really made a difference in my teaching this year. I've been very blessed to have had this experience, and I thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiri. And now I'd like to introduce Karen Miller, who is the CFE Board of Directors Program Liaison for the Fund for Teachers program, to talk a little more about our work with the National.
Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to welcome you to this year's Fund for Teachers Selection Committee Night. My name is Karen Miller, and I serve on the Board of Directors, along with several of my colleagues with us here this evening. Please wave when I call your name. Brian Dewey, the Chairman of the Board, Chris Santiago, who's actually double dipping as a board member for CFE as well as the National Board of Directors for Fund for Teachers, Talbot Baldwin, Mary Beth Canfield, Mona Eel, Michael Patak, and Beth Valente. As a board, we thank you for being here tonight to support the Fund for Teachers. Thank you, associate board members, fellows, community partners, future community partners, community volunteers, teachers, and our CFE staff. When you think about it, the work we have done tonight will make a tremendous difference in the lives of the teacher, students, school, and the greater community. The potential for impact is huge. My parents were both school teachers. When I was a child, we spent weekends on mystery trips to museums, nature parks, and historical places. Spring break and summer vacation was often a learning journey to Mexico, Europe, or a road trip to a national park. At 81 and 85 years old, my parents are still on a quest for knowledge. My dad attends a lecture and takes copious notes, while my mom listens intently and asks questions on a docent-led museum tour. Through my parents' example, I have witnessed what lifelong learning is all about, and in turn, my own desire has deepened. I understand why teachers want to broaden their comfort zones, maximize their potential, and share their experiences with their school communities. They want to make a difference. Thank you again for being here tonight to support CFE, Fund for Teachers, and most importantly, for supporting our Chicago teachers. It is my pleasure now to introduce you to Karen Webb, the founding director of Fund for Teachers, an organization that to date has provided over 6,400 teachers from across the country with more than $24 million in grants to pursue self-designed learning. I am pleased to say that working in collaboration with CFE, 417 Chicago teachers have received $650,500. It's such a big number, right? I had to read it 3 times. Whew. Thank you for your patience. Tonight, we celebrate 10 years of partnership. Thank you, Karen, for your guiding light and for helping us lift up teachers who are passionate about learning.
Thank you, Karen. I would like to also thank Brian and Maggie for putting on a wonderful evening. But if you would indulge me, I would like the 30 fellows in the room to please stand up. All of us are here because of you and because of your colleagues, and we will continue to be here as long as you all are and as long as we keep working. You can sit down now. I have to commend this group. I spent some time on each table as you had your conversations, and I think there is so much that we have lost in current society and politics and other things about polite, informed discourse, and you all did a great job. You didn't agree all the time, but you heard each other and you were respectful in how you went through the process, which is what every single applicant to this grant deserves. Each of them has taken a step out of their comfort zone to imagine themselves in the role of learner again, or to continue as a learner. The trajectory and where they enter is different for each one. The way they tell you what they need to do and how they want to do it is as individualized as each of them. Thank you for listening to them. Thank you for choosing them, and thank you for this partnership. Have a good evening.